In the early 1920s, the Haskell family moved into their new home on the corner of Purchase Street in Newburyport, Mass. The house that they occupied had a history unbeknownst to its dwellers. Underneath the creaking wood floor sat a lofty basement, filled with furniture of years past. In the corner of the room sat an armoire, heavy and dense, placed in front of the huge hole in the deteriorating wall. Little did the Haskells know that behind the armoire and the musty hole of that lofty basement, a tunnel used in the Underground Railroad had been laid down, and it stretched approximately half a mile to the wharf, where slaves could covet themselves onto ships Canada-bound. This tunnel serves as a symbol for the defiant attitude against slavery in Newburyport, and more importantly, a movement that captivated citizens in Essex County in Massachusetts. The main characters involved in this works of abolition in Essex County included some of the most famous, such as William Lloyd Garrison, Frederick Douglass, Sarah Parker Remond, and Charles Lennox Remond. Massachusetts and Essex County in particular were emblematic in the forefront of abolitionism. There, blacks were seen as individuals, not as property, and as a result, through the right of free speech, residents and activists took the moral responsibility to place the human right to freedom above the right to property. Frederick Douglass, born in 1818 on Maryland's eastern shore, was the son of a slave woman and an unknown white male. Subjected to slavery as a young child, Douglass witnessed brutality at first hand, as he was exposed to the degradation and plight of his new and unjust environment. When he was 8, he was sent to Baltimore to live with a ship carpenter named Hugh Auld. In Baltimore, Frederick Douglass learned to read and write, and as a result, he was able to read the works of other abolitionists. Going to Baltimore, he later said, laid the foundation and opened the gateway to all my subsequent prosperity. After years of enshacklement, Douglass vowed that he would escape. Despite several failures prior, Douglass fled Baltimore on September 3, 1838. Weeks later, he found himself in New Bedford, Mass., living with his newlywed wife, Anna Murray Douglass. Almost immediately, he took up proverbial arms with the abolitionists. A man of moral authority and intrinsically valued experience, Douglass soon became an incredibly skilled orator. He began a correspondence with William Lloyd Garrison after speaking at an anti-slavery conference on Nantucket in 1841. After hearing Douglass speak, Garrison knew that he was the man he was looking for. Although a free man, Douglass realized the dangers of public speaking for potentially warranted the unwanted attention of bounty hunters. With some convincing, Douglass decided to join Garrison as a foot soldier in the battle against slavery. In October 1841, Frederick Douglass delivered his famous "I have come to tell you something about slavery" speech in Lynn, Mass. There, he revealed an unsettling truth about the life of a slave in the North when he said, "Prejudice against color is stronger North than South. It hangs around my head like a heavy weight." By recruiting Douglass, a former slave, to his cause, William Lloyd Garrison added an entirely new dimension to the outlook on slavery. The abstract philosophy of abolition had finally been incarnated into a tangible being. William Lloyd Garrison soon became a mentor to Frederick Douglass as they developed a relationship revolved around dense rhetoric, calling each citizen to speak out against slavery. Eventually, and unfortunately, William Lloyd Garrison and Frederick Douglass would part ways due to a divergent view on the means of obtaining the abolition they so desperately yearned for. In the fall of 1835 in Boston, Garrison was dragged off stage and paraded and beaten in the city. Much like Martin Luther in 1521, Garrison was told to recant his beliefs and that the slaves would get freedom eventually. In an open letter to the public, he paralleled the image of a burning house to the uncompromising restoration of rights. Tell a man whose house is on fire to give a moderate alarm. Tell him to moderately rescue his wife from the hands of a ravisher. Tell the mother to gradually extricate her babe from the fire into which it has fallen. But urge me not to use in moderation in a cause like the present. I am earnest, I will not equivocate, I will not excuse, and I will not retreat a single inch. I will be heard. In Essex County, the printing of the Liberator had a profound effect on the increasing resilience towards slavery.
It was major.
Right.
I think the Liberator was just a real, something concrete that people could hold on to.
In 1832, a year after the Liberator's publication, a group of black females established the Female Anti-Slavery Society of Salem. 2 years later, the society voted to include white women. One of the most prominent members of this society was a woman by the name of Sarah Parker Remond. Sarah Parker Remond was born on June 6, 1826, in Salem, Mass., of John and Nancy Remond. Her brother, Charles Lennox, a leading abolitionist orator for the Massachusetts Anti-Slavery Society, convinced her to become an abolitionist. In 1841, after receiving a diploma for a secondary school in Newport, Rhode Island, she returned to her home in Salem and joined the Female Anti-Slavery Society. Remond spent the next decade organizing opposition to slavery, and in turn called for a dramatic change in the political and economic structure of the oppressive states that had chained blacks to its capitalistic predisposition.
Of course, for a black woman at that time, she really would have been utterly powerless. She was an absolute groundbreaker in terms of going out and addressing white audiences. This had not been done.
Charles Remond aptly described himself as an uncompromising advocate of universal emancipation and the friend of opposed Africans and their descendants in December of 1832 at an Abyssinian Baptist church meeting. As an internationally renowned abolitionist, Remond traveled the world speaking on behalf of the oppressed. He was also known as a well-known women's rights activist. Chosen by the American Anti-Slavery Society in 1840 as one of 4 delegates to the First World Anti-Slavery Convention in London, Remond refused to take his seat. The London Conference voted against the seating of women delegates, and as a result, Remond, Garrison, and Nathaniel P. Rogers, in a dramatic gesture, left for the gallery to sit with their 4th delegate, Lucretia Mott, and other female delegates from the United States. The integrated role of slaves in the economy was not the only predisposition the abolitionists had to work around. The Constitution itself remained a damning piece of legislature for the freedom and sanctity of slaves. The Constitution presented a paradox. While upholding the rights of citizens, the notion of who exactly was a citizen and by what characteristics and traits defined that citizen were contingent with the subjective views of the judicial and legislative bodies. The Constitution did not differentiate between the right of the human and the right to property, as it allowed the trading of slaves. In light of this fact, William Lloyd Garrison publicly burned the Constitution in 1854, stating it was a covenant with death and an agreement with hell for blacks. Thoughts of abolition were not restricted to the political realm. Culturally and economically, Essex County provided the masses with the means of enlightened thought through locally published pamphlets and newspapers. Caesar Sartor, a former slave in Newburyport who sued for his freedom in early October of 1773, wrote an article for the Essex Journal and Merrimack Packet on August 17, 1774, pleading Americans to unchain blacks from the ubiquitous system of slave trading and to bear the responsibility of endorsing human right to freedom. The public opinion of Essex County was so soon prepared for the general emancipation, which was virtually done at the adoption of the Massachusetts Constitution of 1780. Before national abolition in 1865, Essex County had already developed systems designed to combat slavery. In 1834, 21 years before the nation caught on, Newburyport and surrounding cities created the Anti-Slavery Society. This institution was one of the first official movements in the New England area. The role of the individual in the story of the abolitionists, albeit any radical movement, is perhaps the most important. In Essex County, Sarah Parker Remond, William Lloyd Garrison, and Frederick Douglass took a stand against the right to own property and attempted to promote the human right to freedom. These abolitionists upheld a moral responsibility to change the ill-conceived notions regarding blacks, and in turn called for not only a local change, but a federal change. However, the legacy of the abolitionists was not restricted to black equality. The constant emphasis of the human right to freedom awoke a realization in women and progressively thinking men as well. The first wave of feminism began in the 1850s. William Lloyd Garrison commented on the nature of the rights of women in a series of resolves printed in the Liberator on October 28, 1853, writing that the natural rights of one human being are those of every other, in all cases equally sacred and inalienable. Hence, the boasted rights of man, about which we hear so much, are simply the rights of women about which we hear so little. Or, in other words, they are the rights of the human kind, neither affected by or dependent on sex or condition. After years of conflict during the Civil War, the movement for women's rights picked up in the 1920s in the battle for equitable suffrage. The abolitionists did not just call for the right of freedom. It set the stage for adamant advocacy for the rights of humanity. This period of abolitionism established a moral responsibility and unknowingly became a forerunner in the human rights movement that would captivate the world in a series of reforms that have lasted up till the present.